Welcome to Live Daf, your online Daf Yomi shir.
Shalom and welcome back to today's Daf Yomi Brachos Taf Tesvav. We're on the last line of Yudalid. Says the Gemara, Va'amar Rabbi Yochanan, Haroitze she kabla of oil malchus shemaim shlema. If one wishes to accept upon himself the complete kingship of Hashem, Yifne, he should first relieve himself, v'yital yadav, wash his hands, v'yinech tefillin, put on tefillin, v'yikra krishma, he should read krishma, and finally v'yispalel, he should do a 6-step process, v'zuhi malchus shemayim shlema. This indeed is a complete acceptance of malchus shemayim. Why is that so? Since it involves a 2-stage process. First, sur meira, removal of impurities and undesirables, then he's ready for V'asei for the next step of connecting to Hashem. First, he's Yifne, V'yitol Yadav, he purifies himself from anything impure, and then he goes ahead V'asei and he truly connects himself completely to Hashem through Tefillin, Krishma, and Tefillah. Continues the Gemara. Amar Rab Chia bar Abba Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Kol hanifle, one who relieves himself, V'yitol Yadav, he washes his hands, V'yinech Tefillin, V'yikra Krishma, Mispalel, Mal Olav HaKosav. The Torah considers him, regards him, ki'ilu, as if Bona Mizbeach, he has built a Mizbeach, an altar, Behikruv of Karban, and he brought a sacrifice, a Karban, upon the Mizbeach. The Mizbeach, in this case, is referring to the person himself. He doesn't go straight into davening, he prepares himself, he purifies himself, he connects himself to Hashem, he creates the Mizbeach. The person himself is the Mizbeach, which enables him to be makriv the Karban, which is the Tefillah. Since we know Tefillah today is in place of Karbanos, he places the Tefillah in its proper place. It's coming from a person who is properly prepared. He is considered to as if he had created a mizbeach to be makriv the Karban, which is the Tefillah. Says the pasuk, how do we know the chsiv erchatz b'nekoyin kapai? I washed with cleanliness my hands, v'asayveva es mizbechacha Hashem, and I've circled around the mizbeach. This denotes that if a person properly prepares himself, cleans himself, prepares himself for service of Hashem, the person himself is considered to be a mizbeach, which is fit to put on it the karbanos, the tefillah. Says the Gemara, Amalei Rava, Loi Savar Lamar, do you not hold ki'ilu taval? That when you wash your hands, you do netilas yadayim for tefillah, it is as if he immersed his whole body in water. The pasuk says, Erchatz b'nekoyin. The pasuk doesn't say, I washed my hands, it says, I washed with cleanliness. This implies that the tahara, that the cleanliness, is applied to the entire goof of the person as a result of him washing his hands. Apparently, the cleansing process of the washing of the hands affects the entire goof, and not just kapai, the hands. Chazimar, have you noticed, this rabbinic student, this young Talmud Chacham, the Asa Marava, who came from the west, Eretz Yisrael, and he said as follows: if one approaches tefillah but has no water to wash his hands, what does he do? He needs to simply wipe his hands in earth, or with srur and pebbles, or with kismis and wood chips, and that is sufficient. That cleans off the sweat, the dirt from the hands, and enables them to daven. Amar, he said, Shapir Kamar. Certainly, it is true, it is correct what he said. Miksiv, does it say in the pasuk erchatz b'mayim that one needs to wash his hands specifically with water? It says erchatz b'nekoyin ksiv, with cleanliness. Kol midi de menaki, anything that cleans is sufficient. Although lechatchila, preferably one should use water, but if water is not available, he may use any midi de menaki, anything that cleanses. As we find, Rav Chizda Layit, he would condemn Aman de Mahadar Amaya Bidin Slaisa, one who looks after, goes after, seeks to find water during B'idin Slaisa, during the time of davening. Why? Says the Gemara, B'hanimili l'Krishma. This is referring to the time of Krishma, when he's waiting to say Krishma, he's not meant to delay and to seek water. Why is that? Says Rashi, because the Zman Krishma will pass. He will lose the opportunity to say Krishma. Better use a midi de benaki rather than wait around for water and miss the opportunity of Zman Krishma. Says the Gemara, Aval Letfila, regarding prayer, regarding davening, Mahadar, certainly he should look and to find water. Explains Rashi, because the Zman Tefillah extends throughout the whole day. Ask the Rishonim, what do you mean extends the whole day? We know that the time of Tefillah Shachar is up until 4 hours, up until Chatzos. It's not unlimited. Say the Mefarshim. What Rashi means to say is that even though he might miss the deadline for Shachris, but since he can always make it up by the following Tefillah of Mincha and Ma'ariv, therefore finding water is so important that he needs to do so even at risk of missing out on the Zman Tefillah. Says the Gemara, Ad Kama, until how much effort is required to find water? How far does he need to go? Says the Gemara, Ad Parsa, until the shear of a Parsa, which is about 3 miles. Says the Gemara, Bahani Milikame, this is regarding a person who's on the road, and he's required to continue walking up until the shear Parsa to find water. Aval Lachere, if this would require him to go back, if the water is located behind him, and he needs to return, Afilu Mil en Yuchayzer. Even if it's a small amount of a mil, the water is located a mil behind him, he does not need to return to obtain the water. Says the Gemara, Umina, this would imply, Milhu de Nechayzer. If it is a sheer mil, a distance of a mil, he's not required to return. Hapachos mil chayzer, but if it's less than a mil, then he's required even if it involves returning back from where he came from. Continues the Mishnah. Hakoirei es shma v'lo yishmi'a le'oznai. If one reads Shema without having the words audible to his ears, Yatza, nevertheless, he is Yotze, that is not a requirement by Kriya Shema. This is the Tanakama. Rabbi Yosi Omer lo Yatza. He has not fulfilled his obligation. When one recites Shema, he needs to ensure that the words emanating from his mouth are completely audible to his ears. Continues the Mishnah, Kara v'lo diktek b'es yiseh. If one reads Shema and is not meticulous in the enunciation of the words, Rabbi Yosi Omer Yatza, he indeed fulfilled his obligation. Rabbi Yehuda Omer lo Yatza, he has not fulfilled his obligation. The Rishonim explain that speaking about one who mumbles and has some letters swallowed, like v'charaf, that he swallows the hey within the next word of af. Examples such as those. Continues the Mishnah, Hakoil Mafrei, if one reads Shema out of order, lo Yatza, he has not fulfilled his obligation. Karavata, if he realizes that he had erred, perhaps he skipped a word or a pasuk, in that case, Yachzor l'makom shetah, he needs to return back to the pasuk where he made the mistake, to the beginning of that pasuk, and he reads from there to the end of Shema. Continues the Gemara. My time with Rabbi Yosi. What is the basis for Rabbi Yosi's opinion that he needs to have the words audible to his ears? Mishum dechsiv Shema. The pasuk says Shema Yisrael, which teaches us Hashmeya le'oznecha ma shata moitzi mipicha. You need to hear what you are saying. But Tanakama Savar, no. Shema teaches you b'chol lashon shata shameya. The word Shema teaches us that one may recite Krishma in any language which he hears, which he understands, and the pasuk is not teaching you anything regarding audibility. Rabbi Yosi tarti shamamina. Rabbi Yosi will derive both things from the word Shema: a, that he needs to be heard, and secondly, that he may recite it in any language which he hears and understands. Continues the Gemara. Tanan Hasan. We have a Mishnah as follows: Cheresh, one who is deaf, Hamadaber of Enishemeya, who can speak but cannot hear. Lo Yitrim, he may not remove Truma. Why? Explains Rashi, because Truma involves reciting a bracha, and since he cannot hear the words that he will be saying, it is not something that he should do. Vim Toram, however, if he has done so after the fact, Truma, his Truma is valid. So we have a Mishnah which says that Lechatchila, initially, one should ensure that what he's saying is audible to his own ears. But Bidi Evet, after the fact, it doesn't invalidate what he did. Now we'll try to find an author, a Man Amar, for this Mishnah. Who is the Man Amar in this Mishnah who holds that the din of Hashmei La'oznecha, to make the words audible to your ears, is merely Ilichatchila and is not Ma'akev B'di'evet? Mantana Cheresh Hamadaber V'Enishemeya. The Evet in, that it works B'di'evet after the fact, L'chatchila loy, but preferably it should not be done. Who is this Man Amar? Who is this opinion? Amar Rav Chizda, Rabbi Yosi. This is the sheet of Rabbi Yosi. As we have in our Mishnah, Desnan hakori Shema v'lo yishmi oznai. If one reads Shema without having the words audible to his ears, Yatza, he fulfilled his obligation. This is the Tanakama, Devi Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yosi, Omer lo Yatza, he's not fulfilled his obligation. Says the Gemara, Ad kan lo kom Rabbi Yosi. Up until here, up until now, do we know Rabbi Yosi's shita? Rabbi Yosi only is discussing Kriya Shema. Lo Yatsa is not fulfilled. Why? Elo Gabi Kriya Shema D'Oraisa. Because Krishma is a biblical obligation, it is a mitzvah D'Oraisa. In that case, the condition of having the words being audible is indeed ma'akev. It withholds the fulfillment of the mitzvah. Aval, however, truma, by truma, which is mishum brachahu, the problem there is regarding the bracha that he's reciting. It's not regarding the actual ma'aseh hafrashas truma, the removal of the truma. That doesn't require speech. The concern is only regarding the bracha. Ubracha d'Rabbananu. Bracha is only a rabbinic obligation, and therefore perhaps it is not as stringent. Number two, says the Gemara, v'loi b'bracha tali milsa. There's another difference, because over there by truma, the mitzvah of truma is not dependent on the bracha. V'loi b'bracha tali milsa. Sure, there's a mitzvah, there's a chiyuv to make a bracha, but nevertheless, if one omits the bracha, he neglects to say the bracha, he nevertheless has fulfilled the mitzvah of Afrashas Truma. So you have two reasons, two leniencies by Truma that we don't find by Krishma. A, it is a D'Rabbanan, the bracha there is a D'Rabbanan, it is sourced in a rabbinic obligation. And number two, the actual mitzvah of Afrashas Truma is not tied to the bracha. So therefore we can conclude that the Mad Amar, the opinion of that Mishnah, which requires audibility lichatchila, but not b'diavad after the fact, indeed is going according to the shita of Rabbi Yosi, who although regarding Krishma requires audibility even b'diavad, he invalidates the mitzvah, he invalidates the Krishma on account of a lack of audibility. However, that is only because it's Deiraisa. Regarding a D'Rabbanan, it will work b'diavad. Says the Gemara, Umi Maid Rabbi Yosi. How do you know that the shita is following, that this Mishnah is following the opinion of Rabbi Yosi, that b'di'eved it is valid? Dilma, perhaps we can propose Rabbi Yehuda. The Mishnah is following the shita of Rabbi Yehuda, who will hold that although not having the words audible to your ears does not prevent the fulfillment of the mitzvah b'di'eved, however, l'chatchila, initially, before the fact, you are meant to do so. There is a din l'chatchila. Rabbi Yehuda will hold by Krishma as well. One is meant preferably to have the words be heard to his ears. And therefore, perhaps the Mishnah which requires by Truma as well that lechatchila it should be heard is following the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. Let's see inside. Says the Gemara, Dilma Rabbi Yehuda. Perhaps we're following the sheet of Rabbi Yehuda. Va'amar gabi Krishma nami, the eved in lechatchila loy. Rabbi Yehuda will hold that there is a requirement to have audibility, although it is not b'di'evet, meaning after the fact we don't invalidate it. However, lechatchila, the preferred manner is to have hashmas aznayim, and therefore, in both cases, by Krishma as well as Truma, lechatchila, initially one is meant to be mashmiya la'aznay. So we found an author for the Mishnah of Truma. It is Rabbi Yehuda. Says the Gemara, Teida, I'll even prove to you. Teida, you should know, because look at the Mishnah. Let's pay attention to the wording of the Mishnah. Mishnah says, Diktani, ha'koire, it says ha'koire eshma v'lo yishmei la'aznay yatsa. The Mishnah sounds like we're speaking about a b'di'evet, one who has already read Shema in this manner, without being mashmei la'aznay, without having the words audible to his ears. He's yaitse, he has fulfilled. It is mashma, it sounds from there, it implies ha'koire di'evet in l'chatchila loy. It is only after the fact, only b'di'evet. But even Rabbi Yehuda will agree that l'chatchila one is meant to do so. Says the Gemara, no, the diuk, the inference of the Lashon of the Mishnah is not necessarily true. Says the Gemara, Amri, the Chachamim responded to this diuk. Haide tani hakoire. Why does it say hakoire, which implies a b'di'eved? It's not to say that Rabbi Yehuda holds that l'chatchila one is meant to be mashmei la'aznai. It is only b'di'eved that it's valid. The reason why the Mishnah uses this term for a different reason altogether. It is lo'idiya koichad Rabbi Yosi. It is coming to show you the extent of Rabbi Yosi's shita. The Omar, the Eved Namiloi. By using this choice of words, by the Mishnah saying that if one had already read Krishma without having the words audible to his ears, according to Rabbi Yehuda, the Tanakama, he has fulfilled. According to Rabbi Yosi, he has not fulfilled. This teaches us the extent of Rabbi Yosi's shita. That even b'di evet, even after the fact, Rabbi Yosi holds that we invalidate the kriya, it is not considered to be a valid kriya shema. So that's why the Mishnah chose the term hakoire, not to say that according to Rabbi Yehuda, l'chatchila it's required. That wasn't the point of the Mishnah. The point of the Mishnah was simply to teach us something with regard to Rabbi Yosi's shita. But of course, at the end of the day, Rabbi Yehuda certainly doesn't even require hashmas aznaim even lechatchila. Di Rabbi Yehuda afilu lechatchila nami yatsa. So, in summary, we have a Mishnah regarding Krishma, a machlokes between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi. According to the stage of the Gemara right now, Rabbi Yehuda holds even the lechatchila one is not required to have the words audible. According to Rabbi Yossi, even b'di'evid, it won't work unless it's audible. So it's two extreme shittas. What about the Mishnah of Truma, which requires only lechatchila and not b'di'evid? At this point of the Gemara, we've established the author of that Mishnah to be Rabbi Yossi, who, although regarding Krishma, invalidates the Krishma, but that's only because it's a Deiraisa. Regarding Truma, since it is more lenient, even according to Rabbi Yossi, b'di'evid, after the fact, he is Yotzi. Continues the Gemara. But Mayu Kimtek Rabbi Yossi. You have established that the Mishnah of Truma, it follows in accordance to the sheet of Rabbi Yossi. And Rabbi Yehuda holds that even lechatchila one is not required to be mashmel la'aznai. We'll have a problem with that. Because we're going to find a brisa which states that by Kriya Shema, which is a deiraisa, one is required to be mashmel la'aznai lechatchila. Let's see the Mishnah. Let's see the Gemara. Ve'elah hadasanya. How are you going to explain the following brisa? One should not recite Birchas Hamazon in his heart. This means in a way that it's not audible to his ears. L'chatchila, he cannot do that. But b'di'evid, after the fact, he has fulfilled Birchas Hamazon. Who is this? Who is the author of this brisa? Mani. Who is he? Lo Rabbi Yossi, lo Rabbi Yehuda. It's neither Rabbi Yossi nor Rabbi Yehuda. Why? Di Rabbi Yehuda ha'amar l'chatchila nami yatsa. If we're following Shittas Rabbi Yehuda, you've just told me that Rabbi Yehuda holds even lechatchila there's no requirement to be mashmel aznai. So apparently this is not the author of this brisa which requires lechatchila. V'i Rabbi Yossi, if we're following Shittas Rabbi Yossi, di'evid nami lo. Rabbi Yossi holds the other extreme. He holds that even b'di'evid, after the fact, he has not fulfilled his obligation unless the words are audible to his ears. So who is the author of the brisa which says that by Birchas Hamazon one is required to be mashmel aznai lichatchila and not b'di'evid? It can't be following Shittas Rabbi Yehuda, who doesn't even require that lichatchila, nor can it be following the Shittas Rabbi Yossi, who requires hashmas aznaim b'di'evid, at least by a mitzvah d'oraisa, which Krishma is a mitzvah d'oraisa. Says the Gemara Elamai, you must say Rabbi Yehuda. You must say that Rabbi Yehuda holds indeed that lichatchila one is required to be mashmel aznai. Although b'di'evid it's not ma'akiv, however l'chatchila one is required to do so. B'di'evidin, l'chatchila loy. Okay, so we're forced to say that Rabbi Yehuda agrees to Rabbi Yossi, l'chatchila one is meant to be mashmel la'aznai, but it's not ma'akiv b'di'evid as Rabbi Yossi holds. And therefore this will be the shita, he will be the author of this brisa, which requires by Birchas Hamazon to be mashmel la'aznai l'chatchila, but not b'di'evid. And similarly by Krishma, Rabbi Yehuda will also hold is a din l'chatchila. Preferably one needs to be mashmel aznai, although it is not ma'akiv b'di'evid. If so, if you have established that we have two shittas, Rabbi Yehuda holds l'chatchila you need to be mashmel aznai, and he is the author of the brisa of Birchas Hamazon. He as well is the author of the Mishnah of Truma, which requires l'chatchila. And we have on the other hand shittas Rabbi Yossi, who holds that be mashmel aznai is b'di'evid ma'akiv. It is something binding. Says the Gemara Alaha, we will find another brisa, which will be brisa Truma number 2, which clearly states that one is not even required to be mashmel aznei lichatchila. It is something that is not even preferred. Who will that be following? Which shita is that brisa following? It can't be Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi holds it's something b'di'evid. B'di'evid it's ma'akiv. It's invalid, even b'di'evid. It can't be Rabbi Yehuda, who requires at least lichatchila. Let's see the Gemara. Elaha de Tani Rabbi Yehuda Brei Dev Shimran Pazi. That Cheirish HaMedaber Ve'ein Shemeya Torah L'Chatchila, that one who is a Cheirish, a deaf person who speaks but cannot hear, he can be Torah even L'Chatchila. There is no L'Chatchila requirement to Mashmel Oznai. Now we're stuck. Mani, who is the author of this brisa? Lo Rabbi Yehuda, lo Rabbi Yossi. It's following neither Rabbi Yehuda nor Rabbi Yossi. Why? I Rabbi Yehuda ha'amar di'evidin L'Chatchila loy. You just told me that Rabbi Yehuda's opinion is that the chatchila one is required to mashmel la'aznai. This does not fit with the brisa of Truma number 2, this most recent brisa of Truma, which describes the halacha of Cheirish, and it is mutter even chatchila. Rabbi Yosi, if the Brisa, Truma number 2, is following Shittas Rabbi Yosi, Hamar Diavad Namiloi. Rabbi Yosi is the other extreme. He holds even with Diavad it's invalid. So who is the author of Brisa Truma number 2? Says the Gemara, Ella, you must say, La'oilan Rabbi Yehuda v'lechatchila nami. Rabbi Yehuda holds, even lechatchila, even before the fact, there's no requirement to mashmei la'oznoi, and that is exactly what it says in Brisa Truma number 2, that cherish hamadava and shomeya can be turned lechatchila. That is the shita of Rabbi Yehuda. So what's the problem? The problem is that we're left with the Brisa of Brachos Hamazon. The Brisa of Brachos Hamazon told us that there is a din lechatchila to mashmei la'oznoi. Who is the author of this Brisa? It can't be Rabbi Yosi, who holds it is b'di'evedin. It is ma'akev even b'di'eved. It can't be Rabbi Yehuda, who you've just told me that Rabbi Yehuda holds. There's no requirement of even lechatchila. Like kasha, it's not difficult. We found another shita. We discovered another shita, a middle of the road shita, which is that lechatchila, it is indeed a requirement. Like kasha hadidei hadarabi. The Brisa Truma number 2, which says there is no requirement to mashmei la'oznoi, that is the day, that is the shita of Rabbi Yehuda himself, who does not require even lechatchila. However, hadarabi, the Brisa of Brachos Hamazon is following the shita of the Rebbe of Rabbi Yehuda, who is Rabbi Lezer ben Azariah, who holds that the requirement of audibility is a lechatchila, but not b'di'evet. This nan, as we learned in the Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Mishum Rabbi Lezer ben Azariah, hakar shma, tzorech sheyashmiel la'oznoi, it is a requirement lechatchila, a preferred manner of reciting Shema in a way that the words are audible. Shenemar Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. You must hear, but it is only lechatchila. So we found a third shita. We have 3 shitas. Rabbi Yosi holds it is me'akev. Rabbi Yehuda himself holds that it's not even a lechatchila. It's not even a preference. And we have a middle of the road shita of Lezer Razaya that it is a requirement lechatchila. Amali Rab Meir. The pasuk says these words should be on your heart. Achar kavanas halev. It follows the intention of the heart. Heinin advarim. One is simply required to recite the words achar kavanas halev with a kavanas halev. He does not need to express it in a way that is audible to his ears. So here we have a machlekes whether there is any requirement at all for hashma says naim. According to our mayor, even lechatchila, one may recite Krishma without having the words audible. According to Rabbi Lezer ben Yaakov, it is a din lechatchila. Continues the Gemara. Hashta da asas lahachi. Now that we've found an open shita, an explicit shita of Rameya, which allows one to recite Krishma without any audibility whatsoever, isn't even de lechatchila. If so, we have another solution to our problem. Afilu teimer Rabbi Yehuda k'Rabbi Tzirlei. Even if we'll alter the facts, alter the understanding of Shitas Rabbi Yehuda. We'll propose Rabbi Yehuda holds that indeed it is a lechatchila to have hashmos haznaim, to have audibility. He holds like his Rebbe, Rabbi Lezer ben Azariah, who assumes the middle road shita, that it is a lechatchila, it is a preferred manner of reciting Shema. If so, how are we going to understand? How are we going to establish authorship regarding Brisa of Truma number 2, which allowed Hafrashas Truma without any hashmos haznaim lechatchila? Who is this following? Says the Mahar Meir. It's following Shittas Rameya. We've discovered a new shita. Rameya holds it isn't even a requirement lechatchila. So the brisa that allows truma without hashmos haznaim, even lechatchila, is Rameya. Rabbi Yehuda. However, Rabbi Yehuda holds the middle road. He holds that it is a din lechatchila, and indeed by Krishma and by truma brisa number 1 and Brachos Hamazon, therefore it is a required lechatchila because Rabbi Yehuda holds that it is a din lechatchila, is preferred manner of doing things with hashmos haznaim. So in summary, we have 3 shitas from one extreme to the other. We have shitas Rabbi Yosi that audibility is ma'akev, it invalidates if it is absent. We have on the other hand shitas Rabbi Meir, who holds that it is not even a requirement lechatchila. We have the middle road shita of Rabbi Lezer ben Yaakov, who holds lechatchila one should be mashmei la'oznoi, but b'di'eved it is not miyakiv. Let's summarize the brises brought down in the Gemara. We have brisa Truma number 1, brought in the beginning of the sugya, which states that it is a din lechatchila. We have the brisa of Brachos Hamazon. There too it states that it is a din lechatchila to have hashmos haznaim. We have brisa Truma number 2, which states that it isn't even a din lechatchila, it is not a requirement whatsoever. Who do these Brachos follow? Which Shita do they follow? Very simple. The Brisa, which says that it is not even required the Chatchila, that follows the Shita that holds that Hashmas Haznaim is not even a requirement the Chatchila. That is either Reb Meir, and perhaps also Reb Yehuda. We're uncertain about that, whether Reb Yehuda holds like Reb Meir or not. But certainly you can follow the Shita of Reb Meir. What about the other Brises which require Lichatchila? So that's following the Shita of Lezer and Yaakov, who holds that it is a Lechatchila halacha to have Hashmas Haznaim, and perhaps they're also following the Shita of Rabbi Yehuda, who could be also holds that is a din Lechatchila. We're unsure about Rabbi Yehuda, whether Rabbi Yehuda holds of this Lechatchila requirement. Continues the Gemara. Tanan Hasan. We're learned in the Mishnah. Now this upcoming Gemara will be just about a repetition of the Gemara up until now, with one minor change. The Gemara actually found another Mishnah regarding reciting Megillah, which the Gemara will analyze in the context of this machlekes. But the conclusion will be the same as we just concluded, that at the end of the day there are three shitas, Lechatchila, B'di'eved, and Ma'akev, and the various shitas, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yosi, Rabbi Meir, as we will see. Tana Hasan, we learned in the Mishnah. Hakol ksherim likus Megillah. All are qualified to read the Megillah, chutz except Mechereish, one who was deaf, Shaita, one who is deranged, V'katan, and a minor. Rabbi Yehuda machshav V'katan, he validates a katan. Says the Gemara, Man tana cheresh di'eved namilai. Who is the author of this Mishnah, which seems to imply that a cheresh, who cannot hear what he's saying, he may not read the Megillah, even b'di'eved, if he reads the Megillah, it is invalid. Who is this Shita? Says the Gemara, Omar of Masna, it must be the Shita of Rabbi Yosi. The Snan, as we have in the Mishnah in Brachos, HaKoreh Shema v'lo yishmi la'ozno yatsa div Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yosi Omer lo yatsa. We see very clearly that Rabbi Yosi is of the opinion that having audibility is a ma'akev, it prevents the fulfillment of the mitzvah. Says the Gemara, Mimaid Rabbi Yosi, from where do you know that the din in the Mishnah Megillah, which prevents a cheresh from reading the Megillah, that is following the sheet of Rabbi Yosi, v'di'eved namiloi, and the Mishnah means to teach us, the Mishnah intends to teach us that a cheresh who reads the Megillah, even b'di'eved, his reading is invalid. How do you know to learn and to interpret the Mishnah Megillah in that fashion? Perhaps the Mishnah is only speaking about al-Chatchila. Preferably, one who reads the Megillah should be able to have the words of the Megillah audible to his ears, but not necessarily is a me'akev. Does it withhold the fulfillment of the mitzvah? Dilma Rabbi Yehuda. It's following the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, who holds al-Chatchila hu deloi hadi'eved shaper dami. Rabbi Yehuda holds that the Chatchila certainly it is required to have audibility, but the di'eved after the fact it is valid. It's considered to be a kosher kriya. So again, the Gemara is going to analyze Shita Rabbi Yehuda. We have an uncertainty regarding Rabbi Yehuda, because we don't have anywhere where Rabbi Yehuda specifically states that the audibility issue is not even a lechatchila. We don't have that. Therefore, there is room to analyze Shita Rabbi Yehuda. So again, we have a Mishnah Megillah which tells us that a cheresh is not qualified to learn the Megillah, to recite the Megillah, and we're wondering, what does that mean? Does that mean that if he does so, he has not fulfilled his obligation at all, and this is following the Shita of Rabbi Yosi? Or rather, the Mishnah simply is telling us that preferably there should be Hashmas Haznaim, there should be audibility taking place, and this is in accordance to the Shita of Rabbi Yehuda, who requires audibility at least lechatchila. Says the Gemara, Lo yisakadaitach. You can't even entertain this interpretation. Why? Because let's take a close look at the Mishnah. The Mishnah groups together Cheresh, Dumya, the Shaita v'Katan. The Mishnah groups together the Cheresh, similar to a Shaita and a Katan. Now we know that a Shaita v'Katan, the Eved Namiloi. Over there, even with the Eved, even after the fact, they have done nothing. There is no recitation taking place. So too, Av Cheresh, the Eved Namiloi. So too, regarding a deaf person, it would seem from here, by the fact that the Mishnah groups them together, that they all have the same status, and their kriya is invalid. Why is the kriya of a cheresh invalid? On account of his lack of audibility. So we see from here that when the Mishnah discusses a cheresh, it's b'di'eved. Even b'di'eved it doesn't work, it is mi'akev. Apparently, it's in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yosi, and not Rabbi Yehuda. Says in more B'dilma, perhaps we can propose Ha'kedisa. Who says we need to group them together? Perhaps each one is as is. Cherish has his own classification. It is a din lechatchila, but with the Eved it's not me'akiv. And it's different than a Sheitav Katan, who has their classification that the reading there is totally invalid. How do you know to connect the two? And perhaps, once again, Cherish is only a din lechatchila, but not me'akiv b'di'evid. And it is following the Shita of Rabbi Yehuda, who holds that Hashmas Aznaim is at least a preference at lechatchila. Continues the Gemara. Omi matzos lokum Rabbi Yehuda. How can you say that this Mishnah is following the Shita of Rabbi Yehuda? We see from the Mishnah itself that is not so. From the Tani Seifa, if we take a look at the latter part of the Mishnah, it says as follows: Rabbi Yehuda machshe b'katan. Rabbi Yehuda says that a katan is qualified to read the Megillah. Apparently, mechlal, that implies that the Reishel of Rabbi Yehuda, the first part of the Mishnah, is not following Rabbi Yehuda's Shita. And obviously, it's following Shita's Rabbi Yossi, and invalidates the Kriyas Cherish altogether. It says the Gemara, no, perhaps, but Dilma Kula Rabbi Yehuda, the whole Mishnah is following Shita's Rabbi Yehuda, it's Regavni Katan. And there are two types of katan, two classifications of katan. There's the first katan mentioned in the beginning of the Mishnah, which disallows a katan altogether from reading the Megillah, and then there's this second level of katan who is older, who has already come to the age of training, the Gil Chinuch, and in that case, Rabbi Yehuda adds that katan is qualified to read the Megillah. You must add some words in the Mishnah. Hakol ksherim likris Megillah. Everyone's qualified to read the Megillah, chutz except from Cher, Shoyt, V'Katan. But what is this speaking about? What type of minor? B'Katan Shlei Gil Chinuch. He has not yet arrived to the age of Chinuch, the age of training. Aval Katan Shigil Chinuch. But a Katan who has come to Chinuch, Afilu Lechatchila Kosher, Diver Rabbi Yehuda. Sheh Rabbi Yehuda Machshe B'Katan. So we settled that problem. The Mishnah can be authored by Rabbi Yehuda, and we need to read it in one succession. The Reisha leads into the Seifa, it's all quoted by Rabbi Yehuda. Says the Gemara, how have you established, in what manner have you established the authorship of this Mishnah? Rabbi Yehuda, that this Mishnah is teaching us that Lechatchila, a Cher should not read the Megillah since it is not audible to his ears, but with the Eved, we don't invalidate the Kriya in accordance with Shitz Rabbi Yehuda, because Rabbi Yehuda holds that Hashmas Aznaim indeed is Lechatchila. If so, that won't work with another brisa. Ela hadatani Rab Yehuda braid of Shimon Pazi. This brisa that we mentioned earlier, Rab Yehuda, the son of Shimon Pazi, says as follows: Cherish hamadab ben shemeya, a cherish who can speak but not hear his words. Turn lechatchila. He can do so even lechatchila, even initially. There's no requirement whatsoever to have the words audible. So now we're stuck. Who is the author of this brisa? It can't be Rabbi Yossi, who is ma'akiv b'di'evet. It can't be Rabbi Yehuda. You just told me Rabbi Yehuda requires lechatchila. So who is the author of this brisa of Truma, which doesn't even require lechatchila? Mani, lo Rabbi Yehuda v'lo Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yehuda, if it's Rabbi Yehuda, the Eved in lechatchila loy. Rabbi Yehuda says, but the Eved, it's not ma'akiv, but lechatchila, preferably, it is required. That's not in accordance with this brisa that allows Truma lechatchila without Hashmas Aznaim. Says the Gemara, Rabbi Yossi. Could it be following Rabbi Yossi Shita? No, certainly not. The Eved Nami loy. According to Rabbi Yossi, it invalidates. It's ma'akiv. It certainly can't be. He certainly can't be the man omer of this brayta, which allows even lechatchila. Ela ma'aser, you must say Rabbi Yehuda, that this brayta of truma is in accordance with the sheet of Rabbi Yehuda. V'afilu lechatchila nami, and Rabbi Yehuda will hold that there is no requirement even lechatchila to have hashmas aznaim. And getting back to Megillah, when the Mishnah in Megillah invalidates a cherish, that is following the Shita of Rabbi Yossi, who invalidates it even b'di'evet, because there is no Shita of Rabbi Yehuda that requires the Lechatchila. Rabbi Yehuda himself holds the Lechatchila, there's no requirement. Just as we saw in the recent brisa of Truma. Says the Gemara, if that's the case, now we have another brisa, and we'll have to analyze it accordingly. One should not recite Brachos Hamazon in his heart, meaning without having it audible to his ears. Shouldn't do so Lechatchila, but b'di'evet it works. Mani, who is this brisa following? We only have two shitas. We have Rabbi Yossi, who invalidates things. We have Rabbi Yehuda, who doesn't even require audibility lechatchila. This brisa, which takes the middle road, that it is required lechatchila, but is not miyakiv mani. Who is it following? Lo Rabbi Yehuda, lo Rabbi Yossi. Neither Rabbi Yehuda or Rabbi Yossi. Why? Rabbi Yehuda, ha'amar afilu lechatchila nami. If we're going with Rabbi Yehuda shita, he doesn't even require audibility lechatchila. And this brisa says that for Brachos Hamazon, one is required to be mashmil aznai at least lechatchilos. That can't be Rabbi Yehuda's shita. On the other hand, Rabbi Yossi, In the same token, we can't be following Rabbi Yossi Shita. That's certainly not so, because Rabbi Yossi holds it invalidates it even b'di'evet. So we're stuck. Who is this middle mandamar who requires lechatchila, not b'di'evet? Says the Gemara, la'olam Rabbi Yehuda. Certainly, the brisa of Truma that we mentioned earlier, which states clearly that Hashmas Aznaim is not even required the lechatchila, that is following Shittas Rabbi Yehuda, who does not require Hashmas Aznaim lechatchila. Afil lechatchila nami. V'loi kasha. You have a question. You have a difficulty now regarding the brisa of Brachos Hamazon, which requires lechatchila. Whose opinion is it following? Says the Gemara, Hadidei Hadarabbe, we found another shita of Rabbi Razai, who was the Rebbe of Rabbi Yehuda, who took the middle road, who requires lechatchila, although not miyake b'di'evet. The Sanya, as we learned on Rabbi Yehuda, from Rabbi Razariya, Hakarish Shema Terich Shashmil Oznai, he's required lechatchila to have the words audible to his ears. Shanamar Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. Amar le Rav Meir. That is not so. There's no requirement even lechatchila. Hari oimer asher noichim etzavcha yom al levavecha, which implies achar kavonas halev heinein advarim. The words follow the intention of the heart. Meaning, even if he merely says the words quietly and it does not have it being mashmiel la'oznai, it's fine. It's even lechatchila. So he is the author of the brisa of Brachos Hamazon. So again, we have a brisa of Truma, which allows Hafarshas Truma without Hashmas Aznaim, even lechatchila. Who is that following? That's following Rabbi Yehuda Shita. We have a brisa which requires Hashmas Aznaim lechatchila Brachos Hamazon. Who is that following? That is following the Shita of Rabbi Lezer and Yaakov, who holds the middle road, the middle Shita, that Hashmas Aznaim is lechatchila. So in summary, again, we have three Shitas. We have a Shita that Hashmas Aznaim is ma'akev even b'di'evet. That is Rabbi Yossi. We have a shita that Hashmas Aznaim is not even a lechatchila requirement, and that is Rabbi Yehuda, and that is Rabbi Meir that we just mentioned. We have the middle road of Rabbi Razariya shita that is a requirement lechatchila. Concludes the Gemara. Once you've come to this point, that you've found an explicit Tana who states clearly that it is not a requirement lechatchila. This is the words of Rabbi Meir that doesn't even require Hashmas Aznaim lechatchila. If that's the case, then we could rearrange the shita slightly. I feel Rabbi Yehuda Karabis Firle. Even if you hold that Rabbi Yehuda, if you explain Rabbi Yehuda's shita according to his Rebbe, meaning according to the shita of Rabbi Lezer and Yaakov, who took the middle route that Hashmas Aznaim is a lechatchila. Even if you propose Rabbi Yehuda also holds that shita that lechatchila one is required to be mashmiel la'oznai. If so, how do we explain the brisa of Truma, which indicates that Hashmas Aznaim is not even lechatchila? Who will that follow? Like Kashya, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Meir. The brisa that allows Hafarshas Truma even lechatchila without Hashmas Aznaim, simple. That's following Shittas Rabbi Meir, who doesn't require it even lechatchila. However, the brisa which requires lechatchila Brachos Hamazon, that is Shittas Rabbi Yehuda. Since Rabbi Yehuda does require Hashmas Aznaim lechatchila, and according to this conclusion, Rabbi Yehuda will hold like his Rebbe the middle route that Hashmas Aznaim is lechatchila regarding other halachas as well, regarding Megillah, regarding Kriyas Shema, regarding Brachos Hamazon, regarding Truma. So in conclusion, again, we have three shitas regarding the requirement to have the words audible to one's ears. We have the shita that it is mi'akev, it withholds the fulfillment of the mitzvah if it is not done so in this manner. That's shita Rabbi Yossi. We have a shita that is not even a lechatchila, that is shita Rabbi Meir. We have the middle road, shita Rabbi Lezer and Azariah, that it is a lechatchila. What are the shitas Rabbi Yehuda? We're uncertain. Perhaps he holds that it is a lechatchila. Perhaps he holds it is not even required lechatchila, just like Shittas Rabbi Meir. Continues the Gemara. Amar Rav Chizda, Amar Rav Shila, halacha Rabbi Yehuda, she'amar mishum Lezer and Azariah, v'halacha Rabbi Yehuda. The halacha follows the Shittas Rabbi Yehuda that Hashmas Aznaim, audibility to one's ears, does not prevent one from fulfilling the mitzvah. Says the Gemara, why does he need to use this double expression? Utzricha. We need both. Diashmina halach Rabbi Yehuda. If you would only say the second part, halach Rabbi Yehuda, havamina, I would think, afil lechatchila. Even lechatchila, there's no requirement, there isn't even a preference to having audibility. As we see in the words of Yehuda in our Mishnah, there's no mention, according to Yehuda, of a requirement of even lechatchila to have Hashmas Aznaim. Kamash Mulan, that's where Rav Chizda needs to inform us. The other part of a statement, halacha Rabbi Yehuda, she'amar mishum Lezer and Azariah, who Lezer and Azariah states clearly that it is indeed a din lechatchila. V'yashmin and halacha Rab Yehuda she'amar mishum Lezer Azariah. If you'd only say this part of the statement, that the halacha follows in accordance to Lezer Azariah, who requires hashmas aznaim havamina, then I would erroneously think tzorach ve'en le'takana. He's required to do so, and if he fails to do so, ein le'takana, there's no remedy. His reading is invalid, as we see in the lashon of Lezer Azariah, who says one is required tzorech. He's required to mashmel oznei. Perhaps that means even b'diavad. Kamash malan. That's Rav Chizda needs to teach us that halacha Rab Yehuda. He needs to add the second part of his statement that halacha follows Rab Yehuda as well. Meaning, just as we find the shittas of Rab Yehuda in our Mishnah, that even if one is not mashmel oznei, he is yatsa. Therefore, we see that it is not me'akev b'diavad. So, in conclusion, Rav Chizda holds that hashmas aznaim is a din lechatchila, is the preferred manner, but is not mi'akev, but the does not invalidate it after the fact. Continues the Gemara. Rav Chizda machlekes. The whole discussion, the whole dispute of the Gemara regarding audibility is strictly but Krishma applies to the reciting of Krishma. Aval b'shar mitzvahs, regarding other brachos, divrei hakol yatsa, all will agree that one is not fulfilled, one is not yotze unless he hears what he's saying. The chsiv, as we see in the pasuk, haskes, pay attention, ushma Yisrael, and listen to what you're saying. Meisvei, we have a brisa which clearly states otherwise. One should not, preferably, recite Birchas Hamazon in his heart, meaning without audibility to his ears. However, b'di'evet, after the fact, he's indeed fulfilled his obligation. So we clearly see that even regarding Birchas Hamazon, one was yotze even without hashmas aznaim. Ella, but rather you must say that Rav Yosef was saying something else. Itmar, this is the way we learned. Omer Rav Yosef, machlekes bekrishma. The machlekes is strictly applicable to Krishma. Why? Shema Yisrael, because in Krishma, the Torah uses the word Shema, which is the source of having audibility. Aval b'shar mitzvahs, but regarding other mitzvahs, that there's no mention of Shema, all will agree that he indeed was yotze even without being mashmel oznei. The Gemara of Aksiv, doesn't it say Haskei Shema Yisrael? Listen and pay attention to what you're saying. Says the Gemara, Ahu b'divrei Torah Aksiv. It's not referring to blessings or brachos. It's referring to the requirement of Haskes, to crush oneself, to pain oneself, to dedicate oneself entirely to Torah in order to merit, to absorb properly the words of Torah. Continues the Gemara. The Mishnah said, if one recites Krishma without having enunciated the words meticulously, there's a machlekes in the Mishnah, according to Rabbi Yehuda, lo yatsa, according to Rabbi Yosef, yatsa. How do we paskin la halacha? What is the halacha lamaisa? Rav Taver, Rav Yosha, halacha k'derei shnei lahakil. With regard to both machlekes mentioned in the Mishnah, the halacha follows both lenient opinions. In the first machlekes regarding hashmas aznaim, we follow the shita of Rabbi Yehuda that one is yotze even without having the words audible to his ears. And regarding the machlekes in the Seifa, if one recited Shema without being meticulous in the enunciation of the words, we follow the shita of Rabbi Yossi that indeed he has fulfilled the obligation. V'amar Rav Tava and Reisha, my dichsiv. What is the meaning of the following pasuk? Sholosh heina lo tizbana. These three things will not be satiated. What are they? Shoil, v'yitzerechem. Shoil is the grave. V'yitzerechem, referring to the narrowness of a woman's womb. And the pasuk actually mentions the third thing, eretz, the land, the fields, who are constantly growing, absorbing water, and constantly in action. It says the Gemara, what is the connection between the grave and the rechem? It's coming to teach you the following lesson. We learn one from the other. Ma rechem, just as the womb of a woman takes the zera and is moitzi a child, it gives forth a child. So too the grave, it takes in and it will give out during tchias hamesim. We can derive this from a kavachomer. Umar rechem, certainly rechem shemachnisim b'chashai, we put into it, we deposit in silence. Moitziin mimenu b'koilis, although the deposit took place b'chashai, in secrecy and silence. However, we will take out from it b'koilis. It gives forth with great fanfare, great clamor, Certainly, sha'oil, we give into the sha'oil, we bury somebody with koiles, with weeping and wailing. Certainly, din, of course, we will take out from it, there will be tchias hamesim with great fanfare. Mikan, tshuva, from here we have a refutation. To those who claim, there's no source for tchias hamesim, for the resurrection of the dead. Here we have a source and a pasuk for tchias hamesim. Continues the Gemara. Tani Rav Oisha kamei de Rava. Rav Oisha said the following statement in front of Rava. Uchsavtam. The pasuk says, Uchsavtam al mezuzah v'secha. You must write the parsha of Shema and have it contained within the tefillin and within a mezuzah. We darshan. Uchsavtam. Write in a fulfilled manner. Write everything. Hakol b'chsav. Write the entire parsha. Afil tzavois. Even those verses, those psukim that discuss tzavois, that are instructive. For instance, the pasuk that says, even those psukim that are tzivuyim, that are commandments, they too belong inside the parsha of Tefillin and the parsha of Mezuzah. Amalei, so Rabbi responds to him, why do you need a drasha to teach you this? Why would you think that one can omit those psukim? It must be that you're following Shita's Rabbi Yehuda. Let's see. The Amar Lachmani, who is the Shita, the opinion that you're following? Rabbi Yehuda. The Amar Gabi Soita, regarding the parsha of Saita, when they used to write the parsha of Saita on a parchment, they used to sprinkle into the water, they used to give it to the Saita to drink. Rav Yehuda holds that one writes the parsha of Saita without the tzivuyim. He merely writes the oles, the curses contained in the parsha of Saita, but leaves out, omits the instructive verses. Oles koisev, tzavois ene koisev. So I would think perhaps here too we write the parsha without the instructive verses. Over there it says over there it says write these curses. It says v'kasav, write. So it doesn't denote completion. It's not uchsav tam. Therefore, one merely writes a limited form of parsha Saita. But here, since it says uchsav tam, from here we derive that one is meant to write the complete parsha. Afil tzavos nami. Okay, so this is the basis for your teaching. You need to tell us that the pasuk Uchsav Tam instructs us to write the complete parsha. Don't think you can omit the tzivuyim, just as Rav Yehuda holds regarding Saita. So it says Rava, there's no comparison between the two things. Auto time to Rav Yehuda is then the basis for Rav Yehuda's shita that we need to omit the tzivuyim. Is it because because it merely says v'chasav without saying Uchsav Tam? Therefore, perhaps it is a limited form of ksiva, and we omit the tzivuyim. Time to Rav Yehuda's reason is a totally different reason. Because the pasuk says, what should he write? The kasav es ha'olos, write the curses. Olos in tzavois loy. We only write the olos, but not the tzavois, not the commandments. Therefore, on what basis would you even entertain that regarding the parsha of Shema, one would omit part of the parsha? There's no indication of any sort of conduct like that in the pasuk. There's no pasuk which tells you that one should omit something as it does by the Saita. So again, there's no requirement, there's no need for you to teach us, to inform us that one must write the entire parsha in its entirety. There's no reason for that at all. Says the Gemara Itzrach, yes, we do need a pasuk to teach us that over here one writes the entire parsha. Perhaps I would think that we learn Xer Shava, just like it says the lashon of ksiva here, and the lashon of ksiva there by Saita, we learn one for the other. Mahasam, just like over there, always in, he only writes the always the curses of a tzavos loy, leaves out the verses of command. Afhachi here too by Shema, he will merely write the rest of the parsha and leave out achanami tzavos loy, leave out the verses of instruction. Therefore, kasarachman uchsavtam. Therefore, the Torah has to tell you uchsavatam. You must write it in its entirety. Afilu tzavois, even the verses that contain the tzavois. Continues the Gemara. Tanei Ravadya kamei de Rava. He learned the following brisa in front of Rava. V'limadtem. You should teach forth. You should teach in a complete manner. V'limadetam. Shehilimutchatam. That you're teaching, that you're reciting of the words of Krishna should be complete. Should be meticulously enunciated. Shehitin revach ben adveikim. He should pause in between the dveikim, the words that tend to get attached to each other. Esav besatcha. Esav and besatcha. The word Esav ends with the same letter that besatcha begins, so they tend to get attached to each other. Esav besatcha, you lose the base there. Make sure to pause in between, enunciate it clearly. Vatem mehera, there the mem will get lost. Hakanav psil, the pay gets lost. Escha me'aretz. So that is the meaning of Lamalatem. Make sure to enunciate the words clearly and properly. Amar Rav Chamar Chanina, Kol HaKorer Krishma, one who does so, he recites Krishma, Umedachtik V'Yaseh. He makes sure to be meticulous in the pronunciation of the letters and the words. Mitzanan Le Gehinnom, they cool off Gehinnom, on account of his effort, intense effort of him heating himself up and concentrating on the words of Krishma. It is midah connected midah, measure for measure. Shenemar, as we find in the pasuk, V'Farish Shaddai Melachim, and one is Mefarish. He clearly expresses the words of Hashem in Krishma, B'Melachim Ba, within the words of Krishma, which is Melachim, which is connected to Melachim Talmid Chachamim. It is Torah. Tashlei B'Tzalmoin, he will have Sheli, he will have snow in Gehenna. Al Tikri B'Fareis, El B'Fareish, when he expresses clearly the words of Krishma, Al Tikri B'Tzalmoin, in darkness, El B'Tzalmavis, referring to Gehenna, that he will be Zeicha, to have his Gehenna cooled off as a result of his effort, intense effort and concentration during the recitation of the words of Kriyas Shema.